too.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But also, too, if you think your spouse is cheating on you, any kind of infidelity, you can give us their email address. We could trace it back to online dating websites and catch them cheating online. Okay, I got a really big show for you today. Something I'm really excited about. This is something I've been trying to get going for you for a long, long time. We have Davida Kelley, who today is this gorgeous model. She's on Model Mayhem. She has her own website called DavidaKelleyFans.wix.com. She's on, I think it's called My Model Place is another site she's on. Incredibly beautiful woman. And she grew up in the cult, the Children of God, that's also known as the Family. Her father was David Berg, I believe, and we're going to double-check all that in a minute. So we're going to be hearing this whole story about her life in the cult and also to her life now. So, Davida Kelley, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. So tell us about yourself. Who is Davida Kelley?
I am currently residing in Virginia Beach, and I have been a professional model and part-time actress at self-employed for like the last 2 decades. And I have a great website, an adult website, and there are PG sections to it too. And like you mentioned, it's DavidaKelleyFans.wix.com. And I have, most of my fans are all military because it is a free website. And so I'm really happy that it was the creators of the site have all been fans of mine, and they made this site for me. And I said, it's a lot of pictures, but let me capitalize on this by making it a free site. And so I'm proud to share it with the military, who are my biggest fans, because it's a great site, and I like to interact with them and engage with them as well. So it's a great site to keep the troops entertained, for instance, and I'm proud to be the model for them.
Okay, and about 6,000 pictures or something you have, right?
Oh, at least 8,500 and counting. We're not done yet. That's half of the pictures.
Yeah, some crazy amount of pictures. Yeah, like, it's amazing, and it's a lot of stuff like adult content, fetish content, and stuff like that. Latex, that kind of stuff, right?
Yes. And my fans come in and order custom content from me. So they say, "Oh, I love you in this picture. I want more fetish content of this." Or they'll order it for their spouses at home, or their spouses will order for their husbands who are deployed. And it's pretty amazing because they want to enact or imagine how they want to get a visual of that. So I provide that for them and shoot their content, and then they order content, and they get a personal Davida model all for themselves and their significant other, or just for their own entertainment. And it's pretty interesting. They come up with some really creative content on the site, extreme fetish and BDSM, which looks really amazing on camera. However, in your real love life, I am not sure how what these crazy folks are thinking. Oh my goodness. Because he's very, very amazingly artistic, and also very creative, extreme fetish, BDSM, lingerie, pin-up, all of the above. So it's quite an interesting site.
Do you ever feel guilty that these guys are supposed to be shooting at the enemy and bombing people and stuff like that, but instead they're looking at your website?
They are shooting at the enemy and bombing people, trust me, okay? When they and in the word of a fighter jock, out of his own mouth, he said the only thing better than bombing the crap out of the enemy is coming back to the ship and being able to get an update from your website. And that came from a captain, an F-18 captain said that. I'm like, well, thank you, sir. Amen to that. So when they're done bombing the crap out of our enemies, they get to come back to the ship, and they get to be entertained by my content.
Well, there you got it. Davida Kelley is a patriot. She's a patriot out here and doing her part for the war effort. Okay.
Amen.
So, And you make a full-time living from doing this now?
It's not a full-time, no, but it does occupy most of my time. In the meantime, I also volunteer with the kids after-school program that I've been working on because the kids in my neighborhood are adorable little 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds, and they walk home from school and they go home hungry. And so I'm going to start a whole Feed the Children After School and have them get a ride home campaign so that the pedophiles in the street don't kidnap them while they're walking home for 5 miles. So I'm setting up Uber rides that I have my own drivers. So I'm going to sponsor it and everything. So it's for these kids in my community that come home and I hear that they had a bad lunch or they didn't get enough to eat that day. And I'm going to set up some, a way that their parents are going to be able to understand that this is a neighbor, it's in the community, it's coming from a safe source, and that it's not okay for their kids to walk home by themselves, and it's not okay for the kids to go hungry. So I'm working on that in my part-time right now. It's a work in progress in my community, and you got to do what you can, especially when it comes down to hungry kids.
Yeah, I got you. Now, give us an idea. Now, you grew up in this, you called it an apocalyptic sex cult. Sometimes it's called the Children of God. Sometimes it's called the Family. So describe to us, what was the Family? What was the Children of God? What was it?
The Children of God was founded during the hippie days in the early 1970s. The leader who founded the cult was David Berg. And him and his wife, Karen Derby, founded the cult. And their first recruits, my mother and Karen Derby, David Berg's other wife, they were both his first recruits, and they became his sister wives. So those three founded the cult, and they brought this whole amazing concept of preach the gospel to every creature and everybody share love, live together. It was all communal and loving, and it was just a perfect hippie environment. You know, all the hippies back then, who wanted to get saved and find religion and a cause and everything. You can get, it just was a whole package. And because David Berg, the founder, the guru, was such a religious fanatic, he was able to just possess his members with his fanaticism about God and Jesus and sex and love and how to preach the gospel through sex and love and how to gain more converts through sex and love. And it's all through Jesus. This is, via the Bible and the Word of God. And he considered himself the prophet, Moses David. He called himself Moses David. And so he was leading, the children of God into this cult fanaticism that he created in his own mind. And it's really incredible how many victims fell to this, and how many do, whenever there's this cult leader out there that's really, is able to stir up people who need a reason to follow something or to believe it. And that's how it started. And then it progressed into being an apocalyptic sex cult. They believe that David Berg preached that it was always going to be the end of the world. The end of the world, the Russians are going to take over. We're going to get nuked by the Russians. The Chinese are going to take over, and America is dangerous. America is why it's going to get nuked off the face of the earth because of its iniquities towards God. And so the cult ended up moving abroad into the far, go into all the world to preach the gospel to every creature. Go to the Far East, go to South America, go to Europe, anywhere but the United States. Because, first of all, he was brilliant because he knew that once the cult started progressing and the way he would sexualize the women in order to gain recruits, that was absolutely not legal in the United States of America. We know that our country would not tolerate that kind of behavior. So he took the cult to the far ends of the earth, and that's where we thrived as the children of God. And then once all the bad publicity started coming out as far as the sexual abuses and to the abuse in communities and to the actual leniency of this sick, disgusting leader and the leaders that he that all were brainwashed and thoroughly believed in his whole genre that implicated it and enforced it on the children that grew up in the cult. And then once that started progressing, the authorities in foreign countries were starting to be alerted to the abuse. And that's when they started targeting the communes, and they started raiding homes with dozens and dozens of families and children, taking them to social services, taking them in. And that's when they had to start cleaning up their act. Okay, sorry, we're not prostitutes for Jesus anymore. Now we're missionaries. So they changed it to the family, to have it, make it more of a missionary lifestyle name. No, we're not prostitutes for Jesus and the children of God anymore. Now we're missionaries. So they kept switching up their name. They went through several names. It's the Family International, and they always under the whole guise of being missionaries and doing humanitarian aid work. And in the meantime, the abuse did continue, just not to the extent, because they were getting in trouble for it. And of course, the leaders at the top the entire time were just like keeping their whole rap undercover and just denying it. And the abuse was still going on in the sects that were the leadership sects, whereas the actual missionaries who were on the field doing actual work weren't. They were receiving the abuse and the effects that they weren't allowed to have secular jobs. You're only allowed to beg for a living or sell religious content, like our own posters and videos, and anything religious that they were allowed to sell. Or you can go, and sing it at restaurants and do busking, or go in subways, or go and beg at stoplights and ask for charity, but you're not allowed to have a secular job. So these poor people are suffering under this dictatorship that's telling them how you have to follow God and follow Jesus, and then you have to give 15% of your money, of your hard-earned money, whatever it is, every man, woman, and child, to the cult guru so that he can thrive. And mind you, growing up with the guru, okay, and he was not my father. My father is Alfred Kelley, which is my biological father. However, in the cult, because it is a polygamous sex cult, my brother, Rick Rodriguez, and I were both my mother's legal children. I'm my mother's biological daughter, and Rick, my brother, was Karen Jerby's biological son. And yet we were both legally adopted brothers, not adopted, legally brother and sister, because of the travel that we had constantly, like relocating from country to country, up to every 6 months, just to keep the secrecy of our of the cult network, that so that the authorities wouldn't be alerted to us. So for the documentation's sake, we were legal children. And David Berg, his biological family, he has 2 daughters. His one daughter turned against him very early on in the cult and accused him of sexually abusing her as a young woman. And when she turned against him, that's when he really turned sick in the head, because then he went to his own granddaughter, Mimi Berg, and then began raping her constantly. She was maybe 11, 12, 13, and brought her in to nurture her and raise her to be the next leader of the cult, along with my brother and myself. We were like the heirs to the cult throne, and we were supposed to be like the golden children that were going to, bring all the young people through the apocalypse and until Jesus comes back on white horses. And
let me ask you a couple of questions. Let's back up a little bit here. Mm-hmm. Now, when David Berg met Karen Derby, you said it was Karen Derby?
Yeah.
Okay. How and then your mother? Your mother was who?
My mother is Sarah Davidito. That is how she is known as in the Children of God.
Okay.
Sarah Davidito.
Sarah Davidito. Now,
yes, and she has all the books about called the Sarah Davidito books, and that's how to raise your children on a day-to-day basis, where she sexualizes and in graphic terminology my brother Rick as early as 2 years old, and how it was all encouraged to sexually abuse your children at that age and how to discipline them. So there was a consequence to everything, and there was always love involved. So if you were bad, then the consequence was discipline. And if you were good, the consequence was you got to get molested. you got seriously sexualized and molested and abused or raped by your own mother, your stepmother, your father, or any adult in the cult. So that's how this sick religion was actually, this is what's going on behind the scenes.
Okay, well, but let's just back up just a little bit. Now, in the very beginning, though, David Berg Karen Derby, and your mother, Sarah Davida. What was their theology in the very start? Was there any kind of repentance? Was it about forgiveness? Was it about do unto others? Was there?
No, it's about let's all love each other and love God and spread the love all over the world.
And the love was
all
sex.
about the apocalypse. Jesus is coming back, so let's go and win everybody over to Jesus' side with love.
And did you actually study from the Bible that we're all familiar with?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure what we're all familiar with these days, but the version we were raised on was the King James Version.
Okay, so you studied from the King James Version. Now, what did you focus on within the King James Version of the Bible?
What did they what?
What did you focus on? Like, obviously not Old Testament,
No. Oh no. Yes, it was all the New Testament and mostly the Book of Revelations. Definitely, it was all the New Testament and a lot of the Old Testament too. We had to read and memorize the entire Bible. And no, I cannot quote it to you, but mostly focused on Jesus' new law of love. And let's bring the law of Jesus' love to the world. And this is how we're going to love people into our cult, with the Jesus' law of love. And the way that the cult interpreted it was through sexualization and abuse. And so, I mean, you can interpret Jesus' words in so many ways. And so many religions have done this. Have done Jesus so wrong and done the Bible so wrong, because it's so easy to interpret the Bible any way you want, essentially through a religious leader. And that's how so many people were sucked into it, because if you have a dynamic prophet on the end that's telling you it's coming from the mouth of God, and he's representing himself as a prophet, then that's when people were really drawn to this, because it was about love, and it wasn't about repentance or trying to, gain anything or get punished or anything. It's just about come in and be loved, and let's spread that to the world. And that's why it caught on so quickly and became one of the largest cults.
How many members, at its peak, how many members were there in this cult?
At its peak, I'd say about 10,000 or over.
Okay, that's worldwide. That's worldwide, right?
Yes, that is. Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah, because there was a little audio disturbance there for a second. Now, just real quickly, what is your faith like today? Do you have any kind of faith?
Oh, I still believe in Jesus. It's not his fault. I love Jesus. I absolutely believe in God. And I know the Bible, and I'm aware of it. I just am also aware of the fact that religion tends to interpret itself in so many ways, and everyone takes it into their own hands to try and interpret it to other people, whereas true religion is just knowing and being aware that, of course, there is Jesus. Of course, there's the Muhammad, and of course, there's God. Of course, there's angels. But it's a matter of being intelligent enough to know how not to fit that into a religion and try and dictate or brainwash people into the version of what kind of God or prophet you believe in.
Now, are you able to be? Are you like a member of a church, or you're just like totally adverse to any kind of organized kind of groups? I wouldn't blame you.
Oh, I understand all religions. It's funny because, like, my neighbor is a beautiful Christian, and she believes that Jesus has been resurrected in South Korea, and that the New Jerusalem is going to be the new spiritual leader of God's, modern-day church. And then my other friend, she is a beautiful Asian woman, and she believes, and she's a Muslim. She's a recently converted Muslim. And it's just interesting to see both of their religions and how they have interpreted it to me, because I see how on one side is more aggressive and the other one is a lot less aggressive. And it's just amazing because they both believe in the same, they're so convinced in their own interpretation of God. And it's interesting to take all that in, because at the end of the day, I'm like, well, I'm not a part of any religion. I'm very spiritual, obviously, but it's incredible to be able to, because I bring them all together and understand all types. But no, I don't have a church at all or any group, but I go to groups. I like to get the feedback, and I like appreciating religion, but within context.
I got you. Now, of these three founders, David Berg, Karen Derby, and your mother, Sarah Davida, are any of them still alive?
Yes. Karen Derby and my mother are still at large. David Berg passed away almost 2 decades ago, and Karen Zerby and my mother, and also Peter Simon. Peter, he got. Well, I'm not sure what his cult name is now, but Karen Zerby's husband, her new husband, is now the new leader of the cult, and the cult has mostly disbanded. Like most of, in fact, I think at least 90% of the young people have already left the cult, and so the cult is pretty much what exists are just like the old timers that joined way back in the early 70s and late 60s, and that's pretty much all that's left is just the old people who are still embracing that, and they won't leave the cult, and they won't deny any of the abuse accusations and the incredible amounts of evidence. And it's just, they're still thriving, they're still living at large, and they're still out there. So, and among not just Karen Zerby and my mother Sarah Davida, but the other leaders that are very responsible for so many tragedies and extreme sexual abuse, assault cases for young children, like Claire Borkowitz, who was in Argentina when the first raid that happened at a commune that was internationally acknowledged occurred. The Argentine government went in and raided a community because Abigail Berry, who is my dear friend and passed away 2 years ago, she was 13 years old, I believe, and she had such bad pelvic inflammatory disease from being repeatedly raped by adults and passed around in the community and been forced to have what they call love-up time or sharing time. She contracted pelvic inflammatory disease and she was dying. She was black and blue from the infection, and they were, instead of taking her to the hospital, they were beating her to death and trying to exorcise the demons out of her. And once they realized that exorcising the demons out of Abigail Berry wasn't going to work, they finally took her to the hospital, where the hospital realized that this 13-year-old child was dying from being violently raped. And that's when the authorities came in and raided the first compound that went on international record as a woman of God.
In Argentina.
In Argentina, yes. And Claire Borkowitz was the leader there, and she was the one that forced the children, namely Abigail Berry, because once Abigail Berry recovered from the hospital, she came forward on her own and confronted the media and told the media exactly what happened. So she was really the first heroine that came forward and exposed the cult for the abusers that they were, and she almost died as a child and then came back to be an incredible lawyer. She came to the United States and was able to get in contact with some relatives, and she ended up being, she was an attorney in New York, worked for one of the biggest firms, and was just so successful and brilliant. And it's really just to think that, you know, our abusers are still out there and living at large. It's really, it just, you know, the statute of limitations has, you know, long been gone, but like look in the case of Bill Cosby with all his abuse victims. They're all coming forward, and like they're not all making this up. Nobody wants to make this stuff up. And the evidence is there. It's just a matter of the fact that these abusers are still out there thriving.
Okay, let me ask a couple of questions. Now, you're saying that a lot of the old timers, the original founders that are very old now, are still active in this. Do they have like a website? What is the name of the cult? What is it called today?
I believe it's the Family International today. And
do they have like a website? How do they recruit people?
Oh, I don't think they're recruiting people anymore. I think what they're doing right now is they're just living off of their sponsors. They're recruiting sponsors. They're not recruiting people to join them as missionaries. They're not going out and preaching the gospel or trying to recruit any more followers. But now they're just recruiting sponsors and people who want to donate to their charity and finance them as missionaries. That's what they're doing.
Do we know where they're living today?
Well, I believe Karen Zerby is all over the place, but she could be in the United States. My mother lives in Costa Rica. She likes to visit Texas all the time because she has a grandson now, and she's full of regrets. But in her words, she can't remember, and she's so sorry. So some of these people, like, because because the cult is disbanded, then they are living wherever, but pretty much probably if they are in the United States, it'd be great because they really need to be banned from here. I don't know that we want to sick them on any other country. I don't think any other country deserves to have them, but they definitely do not need to be in our country.
Now, do you still have any contact with them, occasionally talk to them or email or anything?
Oh, my mother tries to contact me once in a while, and it's just pathetic. You know, again, it's the same thing. I'm like, Mom, how do you explain yourself? Like, how do you not, like, there's nothing that she can say. And it would be interesting if she ever did come up with a sincere apology, but her sincere apology will always be, honey, I'm so sorry. I just don't I'm like, that's incredible. What a great, we'll just use that for every criminal case. You know, I'm sorry, I just don't remember all the decades and decades of abuse that I inflicted on thousands and thousands of innocent lives. I know it can all be a big blur, but imagine you just don't remember. That's just great. I just can't believe that's her word, and she's sticking to it. And that's the way the leaders of the cult are still reacting to this day. They said, we apologize if there were any incidences in the past. We don't promote those anymore. We're a completely different cult now, and we don't remember, blah, blah, blah. So it's really a matter of deny, and, if it did happen, it's absolutely pathetic because these people, I mean, they need to be it's too late for them to get locked up because they're all getting really old. But, I mean, they have to somehow not be able to be thriving as the abusers that they always were. And they're not going to continue abusing children now because they're too old and there's no more children left for them to abuse. So it's just this disgusting fact that they still live at large. And, they're easy to track down. Somebody will figure it out. We could ask the Russians. Ask them.
Well, I could find them. I'm a private investigator. I could find them. You know what, Davida, I forgot to tell you when we were doing the little pre-setup for the show, is that there's a commercial break at the half hour. Okay, so it'll be coming up in a couple of minutes. It's 4 minutes and 56 seconds long. You won't be able to hear it. I'll have you on mute like we did in the beginning, and we won't be able to talk during the commercial either. So it's coming up in a minute. So now we're with Davida Kelley. A good website to visit for all this is called xfamily.org. And it has a lot of these details. There's several books on there for sale from several different authors. There's one in particular you want to recommend? There's a book on there?
Yes, Not Without My Sisters is just an incredible day-to-day account through a child's eyes, who's now a really blooming adult. And she wrote the book, Juliana Buring and Celeste Jones, her sister. And they have a very accurate, very graphic day-to-day account. So read that book because that's the one that I have read, and it's a hard read, but it's absolutely very mind-opening. So yes, Not Without My Sisters by Celeste Jones and Juliana Buring.
Okay, great. So they can go to xfamily.org. Davida Kelley's website is davidakelleyfans.wix.com, and you spell it DAVIDAKELLEY. And there's also a Model Mayhem page and all kinds of stuff. So we'll be right back after these messages with more of Davida Kelley and the story about the family and the children of God, and the whole. We're going to get into a lot of details on this. We'll be right back after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. Did you know that 30% of all people on online dating websites and personal ads are either married or in a monogamous relationship? 30%. If you suspect that your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend may be cheating online, go to emailrevealer.com. And our online infidelity investigation. You give us their email address, and we can trace it back to online personal ads, dating sites, and social networks. We can even expand the investigation and find them cheating on escort service sites or even porn sites if they're registered to porn sites and swinger sites. So check out emailrevealer.com if you suspect your spouse is cheating, and check out our online infidelity investigation. William Ramsey is a producer here at the Opperman Report, and he's just come out with a new book, Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. Now, he just sent me a copy of this book. Oh, boy, it's about 2 inches thick. And there's a chapter on just about everybody in this book that you can imagine. The Beatles, and Jack Parsons, everybody's in here. It's incredible. And I definitely recommend this book. There's a bunch of pictures in here, too, of all these people and different chapters and information. Anselm LaVey and people I've never heard of, too. There's a whole bunch in here. JFC Fuller. I don't know who he is. But it's great stuff by our producer here, William Ramsey. So check out Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. You can find it on Amazon.com, or you could find it in the OppermanReport.com bookstore. We have an urgent bulletin. It seems that the group Strawman is still on the loose. It has been confirmed that Strawman are Canadian, okay, and that authorities are asking people to stay indoors, lock your doors and windows until this group can be dealt with. You could find more information about this group of Canadians, at strawmanmusic.com. You can have your ad played here. Okay, we're looking for sponsors. Okay, in fact, we desperately need sponsors right now to take this show to the next level. So you can have your your ad played here, read live, like I'm doing now, so artfully. Or we can even work up a little jingle for you with some music and stuff like that and play it here. You have no idea how inexpensive it would be to have your ad played on the Opperman Report on 7 stations. Live Friday night, and another 7 stations live on Saturday night, plus replayed every day of the week on different stations, and then archived on YouTube, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and all different kinds of podcasts, Pod This and Podbean, all different kinds of places who archive the show for us. And on those archives, your ad would play indefinitely, forever. You also get a little banner on OppermanReport.com. You get a mention on the air. You get a little interview on the air, and all kinds of fun stuff if you sponsor Opperman Report. We have an opportunity to get this show on a major AM/FM station in California. We've been approved. So if you want to sponsor us into that, so incredibly inexpensive that your ad would be heard by the range covers 5 million people in population where your ad would be broadcast, and all these other stations would be thrown in for free. So really affordable prices to sponsor OppermanReport.com. Get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You can get a copy of that book at emailrevealer.com, or you can get a copy of that book now. It's back up on Amazon.com. How to Become a Successful Private Investigator by Ed Opperman. And this book has been updated a little bit from the previous book that we had that was available to our wonderful listeners. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, and we're here today with Davida Kelley, who is the daughter of the 3 founders of the Children of God, this apocalyptic sex cult, also known as the Family or the Family International today. Her website is davidakelleyfans.wix.com. You can also find our Model Mayhem and Facebook, and all. You just Google Davida Kelley. There's plenty of content. You could find Davida. One thing I wanted to ask you, and we have plenty of time so take your time. You don't have to rush through the answers. Because we can always have you back several times. I know people are going to be very interested in this story as we start getting more into it, especially. But your brother Rick Rodriguez, what can you? A tragic story with this young man who has, What can you tell us about Rick from beginning to end? What was Rick's life like, and how did it wind up?
Rick was David Berg's he was his only son, and he was the one that was going to be the next leader of the cult, the next guru. And he was because of the whole sex cult, love and Jesus, love your child, and how to raise your child in love. My mother wrote the whole series called the Sarah Davidito books, and she has a daily account of how to raise your child according to how the cult, the guru raised his child, how she was raising Rick. So she's, explicit content from as early as 2 years old. They were encouraging, she was, the guru was saying how normal it is to just have sex with your child that young, because little boys, they get erections. So obviously God created that. They wouldn't get erections if it wasn't meant from God. So if God did that, then that means that they deserve, they need that sexual, they need to be sexually violated because they have an erection. So my mother had sex with my brother as early as 2. And then by the time that he reached puberty, he was considered an adult, and he was forced to have sex with my mother and his own mother. And he grew up sexualized like that, and I was seriously molested. But because of the fact that in the cult they believe that you're not considered a woman until you reach puberty, or you're not considered, and as far as boys go, that's fine. Boys can be molested at any age. Girls, you can be molested at any age, but to actually get raped by the cult in the name of Jesus, of course, in love, you have to have actually reached puberty. I didn't reach puberty till I was 16, so I was a very late bloomer, and for that reason, I was never actually raped, as opposed to all the young women in the cult who reached puberty at an early age, like Nene, David Berg's granddaughter, Armandria, and there are other young girls too who were sexualized like that, not to, as well as Abigail Barry, and she didn't grow up with the guru, but again, she was she endured that the rape and abuse by leaders who enforced that. And as boys, they were allowed to be sexualized and abused as early as however early they could get an erection at. So his entire childhood, our entire childhood, was physical, mental, and sexual abuse on a constant level.
Let me ask you this now.
Well, the expectation to be the next guru. So he had all that pressure on him. And the entire cult did not know or were aware of that he was being sexually abused at home. They had no idea. So this is all coming from a very dark place, because he's supposed to be the leader of a cult, is completely brainwashed and has no idea that our parents were abusing us sexually at home in the meantime.
Let me ask you this. Now, as far as age-wise goes, who was younger, who was older, you or Rick?
Rick's older.
Rick was older, okay. And you two were brought up as brothers and sisters in the same home?
Yes. Okay,
now, in this home, it was you, Rick, David Berg, Karen Derby, and Sarah Davida? Just you as a, what would you call it? What do you look at the nuclear family? That was your nuclear little family together?
Oh, it was a nuclear family, but we had a whole community. We had up to at the smallest point, like when we had to travel, there would be maybe 20 or 30 members with us.
Okay.
We had a whole entourage. We had a security. We had people who could speak other languages. We had real estate investors. So we had a whole community, and then once we established a community in whatever foreign country, then we would bring in more members into the secret society that we, as a nuclear family. But it was never just us. Oh, we had a whole team always with us. This is the leaders of the cult. So, yeah, it's a compound that we always lived in.
Okay, but even within the compound, though, did your family live in their own little housing unit, or was everyone just lived wherever they wanted?
Oh, we had many housing units on each compound, like up to dozens of. The last in the Philippines, we lived there for about 7 or 8 years, and we had like one community which had 5 different houses on it, and we had up to 100 staff. We call them staff, who were there to be trained by the cult, and everybody has their own rooms and stuff, but everything's shared. So it's like nothing is personal, okay? Everything is shared. It's all open to everybody and to everyone is everything, but it's just living in luxury, but in a commune where you don't go outside the walls. No contact with the outside world.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Within the walls, yeah.
Now, you and Rick, did you have your separate rooms? Did you have your own rooms as little kids?
No, we everybody always slept together. It was just it's not separate rooms at all. It's a community. It's a commune, and it's a sex apocalyptic commune.
Right.
And so everybody sleeps together. Whoever wants to sleep with you or next to you or with you, that's how that works. Nobody had any privacy at all.
Oh, that's what I was trying to get my mind around. So now it was the brothers and sisters was just you and Rick, though, right?
Yes, Rick has a sister, Ketchy Berg, or Ketchy Zerby, because her father also was another father from a different dad, just like Rick's father was. He doesn't even know his own father. He never did. He wanted to find him. Ketchy may or may not know her own father, but Rick's biological half-sister is Ketchy Zerby, and she's also Karen Zerby's daughter.
Now, when you kids were growing up, you'd wake up in the morning. Did you have chores? What did you have to do?
Of course, there's chores. It's a huge commune you're living in. First thing is always devotion time. You always have to read the Bible first thing in the morning and sit around and have devotions. Make sure you pray to Jesus, and then have some love-up time. And then you go about your chores and fulfill your chores, and then you go about your Bible studies.
And what about education? What other kind of schooling? Math, history, anything like that?
Basic education is all that was required. Not required. It was just suggested. If you can get basic education, yes, every child in the cult is intelligent because we can all read and write in at least 5 different languages. So, but at the same time, we do not have the experience of ever even having, well, maybe to the extent possibly of a GED equivalency, but beyond that, schooling, it was condemned because it was considered worldly, so it was all vocational. Once you could absolutely read and write and do your basic mathematics, then from then on it was all vocational because they considered education to be absolutely unnecessary. And so that's why so many kids who left the cult and tried to thrive on their own ended up committing suicide because they had nowhere to go. They couldn't get hired anywhere. They couldn't get a job at McDonald's because they could not prove their education whatsoever. Yes, we can speak 5 languages, and we can read and write, we can do anything and everything, and we're the master of all crafts, but no, we have no way of proving our education because education was not what the cult was about. They wanted religion, not education. Education was of Satan, and religion was of Jesus.
Now, what about TV, radio, music? Did you have any of that?
All of the above, yes. There was a whole. We had our own social media in the cult, and it was called. What was it called? MWM, and that's what Celeste Jones and Juliana Buring and Christina, sorry. That's what they wrote about, is their experience in the social media network. That's the book that I mentioned, Not Without My Sisters. That was their role, and they were also considered an elite sect of the cult because they were the social media that everybody would see. We had music videos and all, and distributed pamphlets and everything. So, and they had all these beautiful young children who would, perform and just be and represent the cult with this beautiful face of here's our youth, and we all had to do that because we were forced into that social media and to put on this face and show to the world what great performers we were, and models and actresses and singers and media socialites, and put on that game face, and meanwhile we're being horribly sexually, physically, and mentally abused behind the scenes to the world. MWM, and they had the Love Boat, which was a whole actual yacht with a whole recording, musical recording studio on it and everything, with great musical entertainment for the public who really was attracted. You can never go wrong with music, so that was a big factor in how we came across the outside world.
But like, were you allowed to watch regular secular TV, like the Brady Bunch and stuff like that?
No TV, no radio, no candy, no interaction with the outside world. In fact, me and Rick, we never even met another child our own age until he was 13 and I was 11 when we first met another cult kid from the outside, because they started bringing in the young people from the outside, including David Berg's granddaughter, who he infatuated with, and wrote the whole Heaven's Girl series after. That's who he modeled her after, Heaven's Girl. She was going to come into the apocalypse and save the world and fight off the Chinese, or win the Chinese over, actually, through getting gang raped by her victors, and then she's a victim but a victor, and it's really disturbingly incredible. You have to look at these. It's all on xfam.org that you can see these pamphlets that were produced for the cult members to read, and the transactions and how it came about for the artists to interpret. And so through art and music is how after once the sex scandals, and the cult can no longer be the prostitutes for Jesus, they came out with music and art instead and attracted the public via that.
Now,
but no, we never met any other children. Like, we were completely, no education, no contact with the outside world, no nothing. Except maybe you can go to the zoo once every 6 months on an excursion, or to the dentist maybe once every 6 months. but that's it. Like, otherwise, no contact. So we grew up in this lifestyle with absolutely no idea of how to associate with or understand the outside world, except for CNN. We were allowed to watch the news with some parenting advice in the background, but it was also very violent. We're not allowed to watch any violent or anything like that. So, yeah, no. No.
Wait, you said you were allowed to watch something? What was that again? You were allowed to watch?
We were allowed to watch the news, like BBC or CNN.
Gotcha. Now, what about your
as long as there was no violence. If there was violence and it involved like a third world, if there was any kind of war going on, then no, it couldn't TV off, because Jesus is not about war; it's about live.
Now, what about your diet? What did you eat?
It was always lots of hard proteins that my stomach to this day is still dying from. Just very clean diet, very. It was just, I mean, in the Far East, I mostly spent in Brazil. The Philippines, Japan, and Brazil where I spent most of the years growing up in the cult. It's just whatever is locally produced, but no sugar, nothing that's bad for you. Definitely no sugar, no candy, nothing sweet. So the only time you were allowed to eat chocolate was you got to have love time with Grandpa. That was always fun, because you can look forward to cuddling with Grandpa and having some chocolate too. And he would let us watch Scooby-Doo.
Oh, really? Hey, let me ask you a question though. You don't complain about not having sugar as a kid, do you? Because sugar's really bad for you. I think I'm much better when I'm off sugar. What about today? Do you use a lot of sugar today, or are you totally off sugar as well?
Really? No, hell's no sugar. Absolutely not. If I had a kid, absolutely no sugar, no.
Right, okay, good.
Sugar-free, they have plenty of products out there that are sugar-free, so that's not a problem.
Okay, now, what about alcohol and drugs? Were they using alcohol and drugs in the cult?
No drugs. Definitely alcohol. Like, for instance, when David Berg was, he was always an alcoholic, a raging alcoholic. That's where we got half of his inspiration from. Was from these morbid dreams that he would have and inspirations in the middle of the night. And then he would get alcohol abuse and then would want to have a sex rampage. And whatever child, it was just myself. And then once he brought his granddaughter, Meanie Berg, and Armandria, and Christy, that brought them to live with us, then he divided his attention between all of the girls, all of the young girls, and he could have his pick of women. He could have sex whenever he wanted with whoever. Whenever you just need to be obedient and be very have a great countenance about you and be willing. Like, for instance, I was 7 years old when he first was broken. The news was broken to him that his daughter turned against him and exposed him for being the pedophile that he was. So he was like, okay, then I just want to have sex with the children. Just bring the children. So I got dragged out of my bed, and they were forced. My mother was forced, pouring red wine down my throat, saying, drink, because we want you to be nice and loosened up, Grandpa. And I'm like, I don't want wine. She's like, you don't tell Grandpa I don't want wine. So I was force-fed alcohol from the age of 7. That's what I remember. This goes back a long time, though. I was married to the cult guru at age 5. I had a ring on my finger that said, I am going to be his child bride. And now I am the bride of David Berg. And I couldn't, and of course he couldn't consecrate it. Consecrate it? What's the word?
Consummate.
Consecrate it?
Consummate.
He couldn't rape me until I reached puberty. Okay, let's put it in real simple terms to the public here. Yeah, he could not, so here's my ring. But in the meantime, I got out of bed so that I could have, get molested at 3 a.m. in the morning. And so then when I was like crying about, like, don't force me, please, don't make me drink this, and don't make me have sex at 3 a.m. And we're used to late anything, but this is really disturbing because he was hysterical about his daughter turning against him in the media. So then at that point, that's when his granddaughter replaced me, Meanie Berg, and she willingly took on being his sex slave granddaughter, and she had reached puberty, so she was repeatedly raped by him under that circumstance and that particular during that time.
Okay, let me ask you some questions. Now, you said you were force-fed alcohol as a child. Did this cause any kind of alcohol addiction to you or aversion? How did you react to that as an adult?
As a young adult, it was an aversion. Not an aversion. As a young adult, I was disgusted by it, but then it was almost like it was later on in life. Like I have had, not with alcohol. It's like, how would you say, like, with the survivors from our group, we suffer from such bad PTSD that we need either to be treated or to be mentally capable of dealing with our issues. So I go through phases where sometimes I will fall off the wagon, or if I don't fall off the wagon, like I'm always functional. I'm always on point. I'm always never, I don't miss a booty shoot. I will always accomplish my purpose. But yes, we get depressed. That's what it is. It's anxiety and depression because we've been raised with the fear of if you are good, you get to be rewarded by getting assaulted sexually. And if you are bad, you will get horribly beaten and abused and put in isolated situations and corrected. So that comes and goes. Like in Abigail Berry's case, like she struggled with alcoholism as well, and she went to rehab. She went to Malibu, the Malibu Rehab Center in LA for rehab. And after a year, like it really didn't help her because she didn't have any moral support behind her after that. And so her family turned against her. They're like, oh, you're an alcoholic, and dismissed her. Meanwhile, she was so supportive of them. She was paying their bills, taking care of them. And all she needed was some friends and family, and some of us just don't have that. So that happens, like, or in a lot of cases, or drugs, or. Okay. But then it turns into suicide, and it's a result of.
So then, in your life, you have had a little battle with alcoholism on and off.
Oh, of course.
Okay. Now, what about drugs? Have you had a battle with drugs too?
I never battled with alcoholism or drugs. Let's rephrase that.
Okay.
I can always I can deal with drugs under any circumstance. How about that? Okay, I'm a professional. I can absolutely handle my substance abuse issues very well because I'm still successful. Okay, so when you're not successful and you're dealing with abuse situations, then that's when you need help. But if you're still successful and you have PTSD problems, which is a huge issue, not just amongst cult survivors, but military survivors, there's, of course, there's going to be tendencies and issues, but as long as you're productive, let's put it, then yes, if you have substance abuse issues, that's fine. As long as you can recognize them and, either you can do them or you can't, but as long as you're aware of it and you know what your limits are, then that's the big decision that us adults make.
Okay. Now what about, because you've chosen this career, sexualizing yourself as a fetish model, do you believe that that's was an outcome of your early sexualization and the abuse you had as a child?
Yes, and I'm grateful for that in a really disturbing way, because I did not have a college education. I did not have any education. And because I have always been an adorable personality and little model, and I've always been sexualized, I have no problem as an adult now taking that responsibility and absolutely putting myself out there, because I am proud of me and how I have come out. But that's only because that's all I have. I don't have brains. I'm intelligent, but I'm not smart. I could not go to college and pass right now if you paid me to. That's a little bit sad, but that's the reality. And that's why so many children committed suicide, because when they came out, like Abigail Berry, for instance, she got a college degree and became a successful New York attorney for decades in the biggest firm in New York. And because she was smart and incredibly intelligent. So there are children that have that in them. I didn't. I only had my looks. That's why I am a successful model right now, because I have a personality and I am strong. And I'm not ashamed, and I'm willing to talk about it. And it's so, and there's nothing, and that's who I am, and looking pretty good doing it. But that was only my situation. But other kids, if they don't have college degrees, then they end up committing suicide. And if they are smart, then they will get one.
Let me ask you this. How old were you when you finally escaped from the cult?
It's not a matter of escape. You are allowed to leave any time that you want, except that when you do leave, and in my case, and Rick's case, we were stuck in the Ukraine, in Odessa.
Oh, my God.
Yes, and we were there doing humanitarian aid work, and while we were living with missionaries from the cult who had no idea that David Brooks was sexually abusing us and his own family and granddaughters and children, and then implementing this missionary lifestyle to go out in this freezing cold weather and do humanitarian aid work. The compound in the Ukraine that me and Rick were at in our last missionary stint, we were starving to death, and it was freezing cold. And in the unit that we had a pregnant woman, and we're like, this is ridiculous. How the fuck do these people still believe in this guru when we can't support ourselves and we still have to give 15% of our income? And me and Rick realized then the hypocrisy of the cult and the guru, because we're like, oh my God, missionaries out here are actually starving. We can not even afford to donate the missionary charity that we received to the hospital. We had to actually live on it ourselves.
Okay, but let me ask you this: how old were you at this point?
Okay, I was 18. Rick was, or I was 19. Rick was 20, and this is when we were in Russia. So this is what this is when I left. I left when we were in Odessa, in the Ukraine, the former Soviet Republic, because you're allowed to leave again, but without any clothes on your back, without any support, without any money, without any funds, without any sponsorship, nothing. You're like, okay, that's fine. You can leave anytime. Here you go. We're going to take everything that you own, and we're going to keep it, and you get to walk out on the street with the clothes on your back. That's how you get to leave the cult. You don't escape the cult. You can walk right out. Find your own cab if you can find one. Okay, you have nothing.
Davida, we got another commercial break coming up. Now, I feel like we're really on a roll now. We're getting a lot of good information out of you. So we can give me more time when we come back from commercial?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Okay, I know you would. All right, great. Okay, I think we're really starting to get someplace. We're with Davida Kelley. She's a former, well, she was a kind of captive almost of this Children of God apocalyptic sex cult. It's also known as The Family. She's also now a model at this website called
Survivor and the model, yeah.
Survivor.
Not
right.
a captive. Yeah, Survivor.
Okay, and the website is Davida Kelley Fans .wix.com.
It is on the website. Make sure that your viewers are aware of that. That's fine, though. There's also a PG sites on there as well.
And also, too, Model Mayhem. You can find her on Model Mayhem. And if you just Google Davida Kelley, you'll find all of her social media stuff. And a website that we're promoting today is xfamily.org, where they have a whole bunch of books for sale and all kinds of information. We'll be right back after these messages with more of Davida Kelley, right after these messages here. Okay. And now a word from our sponsors. Did you know that 30% of all people on online dating websites and personal ads are either married or in a monogamous relationship? 30%. If you suspect that your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend may be cheating online, go to emailrevealer.com. And our online infidelity investigation. You give us their email address, and we can trace it back to online personal ads, dating sites, and social networks. We can even expand the investigation and find them cheating on escort service sites or even porn sites if they're registered to porn sites and swinger sites. So check out emailrevealer.com if you suspect your spouse is cheating, and check out our online infidelity investigation. William Ramsey is a producer here at the Opperman Report, and he's just come out with a new book, Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. Now, he just sent me a copy of this book. Oh, boy, it's about 2 inches thick, and there's a chapter on just about everybody in this book that you can imagine. The Beatles, and Jack Parsons, everybody's in here. It's incredible. And I definitely recommend this book. There's a bunch of pictures in here, too, of all these people and different chapters and information. Anselm LaVey and people I've never heard of, too. There's a whole bunch in here. JFC Fuller. I don't know who he is. But it's great stuff by our producer here, William Ramsey. So check out Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. You can find it on Amazon.com, or you could find it in the Opperman Report.com bookstore. We have an urgent bulletin. It seems that the group Strawman is still on the loose. It has been confirmed that Strawman are Canadian, okay, and that authorities are asking people to stay indoors, lock your doors and windows until this group can be dealt with. You could find more information about this group of Canadians, at strawmanmusic.com. You can have your ad played here. Okay, we're looking for sponsors. Okay, in fact, we desperately need sponsors right now to take this show to the next level. So you can have your your ad played here, read live, like I'm doing now, so artfully. Or we can even work up a little jingle for you with some music and stuff like that and play it here. You have no idea how inexpensive it would be to have your ad played on the Opperman Report on 7 stations live Friday night and another 7 stations live on Saturday night, plus replayed every day of the week on different stations, and then archived on YouTube, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and all different kinds of podcasts, Pod This and Podbean, all different kinds of places who archive the show for us. And on those archives, your ad would play indefinitely, forever. You also get a little banner on OppermanReport.com. You get a mention on the air. You get a little interview on the air. and all kinds of fun stuff if you sponsor Opperman Report. We have an opportunity to get this show on a major AM/FM station in California. We've been approved. So if you want to sponsor us into that, so incredibly inexpensive that your ad would be heard by the range covers 5 million people in population where your ad would be broadcast, and all these other stations would be thrown in for free. So really affordable prices to sponsor OppermanReport.com. Get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You can get a copy of that book at emailrevealer.com, or you can get a copy of that book now. It's back up on Amazon.com. How to Become a Successful Private Investigator by Ed Opperman. And this book has been updated a little bit from the previous book that we had that was available to our wonderful listeners. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Davida Kelley. Her website is davidakellyfans.wix.com. But also, too, you can hear about the story of the family and the children of God at xfamily.org. Now, Davida, we left off, you were saying that you and your brother were about 18, 19 years old. You're in Russia. You got no high school diploma. Probably no driver's license, I would assume. You know, how do you get out of there? How do you get out of there? So many people would have died there in Russia. Wherever they lived, they would have went to work on a farm or something, you know, and just they'd be living there right now. How did you guys get out of there?
So glad you asked, Ed. When leaving the cult in Russia, because most of our humanitarian aid and charity was being funded by the Russian mafia, we had no idea. We were just like, oh, wow, we have sponsors, yay. We're not going to starve in the winter of the desolate plains of Odessa, which is actually on the Baltic Sea, so it was freezing. And we had no concept of we didn't care who our sponsors were. We didn't know them. We just knew that they supported and sponsored us. So I'm like, you know what, this is not working out well, and the delusion from the cult members so dedicated to serving the guru, and there's no way we could tell them the truth. They would never believe us. They're out here literally giving their lives for the guru, who's at home in this luxurious compound that he lives in, sexually assaulting whatever child he feels or woman he feels like he is in the mood for. And we're out here like, this is how the actual missionaries are starving and surviving.
Okay.
And so both myself and Rick were like, okay, he went back to live with his mother because she was supporting him. She gave him funds, and he that way out. I said, I'm leaving. I'm leaving this and going to go be sponsored by my sponsor. So I had my first mafia sugar daddy in Russia, and I had no idea what mafia was, or gangster, or criminal life. Oh my God! And when you're that young and you're that impressionable and that naive, can you imagine what I was subjected to? Because becoming part of the Russian mafia and being their little sex slave instead of the cult. I joined the paramilitary Russian Special Forces camp because I wanted to be a fighter pilot on my mother's side. And my mother has a great legacy of patriotism. On our family side, our family comes from a line of fighter pilots. Her grandfather was a SWU B-52 bomber in War II called Miss Haven.
Let me stop you for a second. I have a couple of questions. You said that the Russian mafia was sponsoring the cult over there in Russia. Now, what was their motivation for doing that? Were they getting access to these little kids as well?
Little kids? By me, yes. If you mean access to little kids, no. There weren't any little kids at the unit. When you go out and approach wealthy sponsors and ask them to sponsor the charities and the humanitarian aid. And then, of course, if you're adorable looking as an 18-year-old like me, then yes, of course, they can sponsor you. So that's who I went to.
Gotcha.
But and to make the long story short, is I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and I'm like, here's no better way than to get an education by former MiG pilots in the Soviet Union. You can get a very cheap education that's very efficient, and I wanted to be that because my family, like I said, on my mother's side comes from a Air Force family, so that's what I wanted to be. So I joined the Descentana Parachutist Academy, and I graduated with not quite, but close. I had some real the last jump I did out of a plane, I wiped out and knocked all my teeth out. So that's when I was like, okay, I can't be jumping out of planes anymore and doing paramilitary training because I was just 18, and so the mafia took me in under their arms.
Wait, let me stop you for a second. How were you able to join the Russian military? Did you have Russian citizenship?
No, as a foreign exchange student, they have programs over there. All my other foreign exchange students that were also studying to be as MiG pilots were all Iraqis.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. So then, okay, and what happened? You bounced out of that because you broke your teeth. You don't want to do that anymore. How'd you get out of Russia? How'd you wind up getting out of Russia?
Oh, it's really easy. Your visa expires.
I know, but how'd you the plane ticket and
your
stuff?
Visa expires. Your visa?
Yeah.
You have a visa to be there as a foreign exchange student. Once that expires, you have to renew it. I renewed mine. And then when I got back into the country, I was back into the same, I found myself back in the same Russian mafia amazing situation because they at the time, wow, this was right when the Iron Curtain had fell. So this was really a lot more, how would you say, it was a lot, not as, they're a little more intelligent now. Back then, this was just, it was just incredible because, like, wow, I'm here, I'm protected, and I'm sponsored, and I felt so secure in an environment that I had no idea that I had no idea who it was or what it was. And I could read and write fluently in Russian, but I was learning to speak the language. We were all taught to read and write fluently in Russian before we even got there. So
let me ask you this.
I could read it and understand it.
These Russian mafia guys, what kind of crimes were they doing?
Well, my sponsor, my sugar daddy sponsor, he was actually doing oil exchanges he was in the oil business with the Chechens. And so he was between the Russians and the Chechens, and he was Ukrainian. So he got stuck in some real bad shit that went down between the Chechens and Russians, and they both tagged him. So that's when he kind of said, okay, my shit's going down. The Chechens just sold me this, and I'm supposed to sell it to the Russians, and the Chechens just stole it back. And this is a whole other fun story for maybe one of your other interviews of how I got kidnapped by the mafia on the border and was condemned to the gulags in Siberia because I had all this oil exchange information on me that I was not aware of. Well, I was aware of, but was importing and exporting as a, a donkey, sort of, with guards, or mule. That's what Mexicans do. I have a whole other word for that in Russia. But that's a whole other story for another day. But in the meantime, I got caught up in that, and that's when he said in Russian to me, "Надо быстро ехать." That means you need to get the fuck out of here.
Okay, what's your language?
Right now.
Believe it or not, we can't curse. Okay. Now, let me ask you, okay, but now how did you want, because your visa expired, but how did you afford the ticket to get out, and where did you go? Where did you stay when you got out? What did you do?
Oh, the Russian mafia got me my ticket out.
Okay.
It's actually the Ukrainian mafia. Sorry. Oops, let's not get our mafias mixed up here. The Ukrainian lords at the time, they paid for my visa out, and so I got a nice stamp on my visa that said you have expired and you are not allowed into the Soviet Soyuz for another decade. So that's how I got out. And then I came to the United States, and I arrived in New York. First, I went to London and lived there with my stepsister. and that's where she learned. She taught me how to like adjust to life outside of the cult, because she also was a survivor, and her dad, Jeremy Spencer, was a very famous cult member, because he was one of the main influences musically in the Children of God and the family cult. And she taught me how to adjust to life outside of the cult and how to be a stripper. So she said, Davida, why don't you put on an English accent and go to New York and go work at Scores nightclub there. Scores nightclub, which is a famous nightclub.
Yeah. What year were you working at Scores?
Mm-hmm. Well, she said, go over there and dance with him and put on an English accent, and the Yankee boys will love you. I'm like, I don't know anybody in America. I don't even know my own family. I don't know my relatives. She's like, it's all right. Go over there and pretend you're from London. Tell everyone you were born in Maidavale. They'll all know that, because that's where the Beatles have their studio. So go over and get you a job at Scores, and they'll absolutely hire you. And that's what I did. I went into Scores. I was 19 and said, I'm Kelley, and I would like to dance here. And I'm from London, and I got hired.
What year was that?
Oh, Lord. We're talking, let's see. I arrived in the United States when I was on my 22nd birthday. So... Oh, my God, we're talking 2 decades ago. Thank you very much, Ed. I feel so mature.
So that was the 90s?
The 90s, yes.
And how long did you work at Scores? How many years?
A decade.
Okay, all right, we got to talk. Okay, now let me ask you a question. Now, okay. What about this?
Yeah.
There's a lot of famous people that were in this, River Phoenix and Joaquin Phoenix. Did you know them?
Rose McGowan as well.
Rose McGowan is...
No.
Rose
McGowan. Her parents were also in the Children of God, and her family left early because when she was 9, same with River Phoenix, their family left early because they saw all this the disgusting the sex abuse and the child abuse that they were enforcing. And so their parents were smart and left early. And their kids ended up in Hollywood as young actors, and River Phoenix, that was Hollywood, because he wasn't exposed to enough abuse that young to have that much impression. But when he went from that cult environment straight into Hollywood, then yes, he overdosed, didn't he? Yeah. And that's a tragic event. But it's just a legacy of his life, because his parents were in there, and at least they got him out early enough. But it still was enough to have it affected his entire childhood. He went straight from being an abused child in a cult to exposure in Hollywood, and that was a tragic loss of life, one of hundreds and hundreds.
Now, what about Julius Assange, the guy from WikiLeaks? He's connected to one of these cults. Was it this same cult, or was it a different one?
Oh, I hope he's connected to ours. That'd be great.
I don't think it is. I think it's the other. Okay. Now, it seems like a lot of people from the cult, like your sister became like a movie producer or something like that, or a filmmaker, went into showbiz. Is there a reason why so many people went into the showbiz?
Okay, I don't have a sister that went to any media. All my sisters are really intelligent, and they don't want anything to do with me because I'm a very popular web model, and they do not approve of that because they all went out and got themselves their own college education because they're that smart. But they're a lot younger than me, so they have that opportunity to educate themselves. So the reason that, again, like I mentioned before, is like you either have your looks to go by or just your brain. So you have to have something because you don't have anything to prove. You have nothing to prove to the public. So you either have to prove to the public that you are intelligent enough to absolutely get this job on Wall Street or in a law firm because you can absolutely outthink and be brilliant enough with your proof of education that you achieved after the cult once you got out, or you're not smart enough to be able to do that in my case. So you have your good looks and you've got some great genetics. My mom was a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. I do have to give her props for that, for being genetically involved, but otherwise I didn't have any. That's it. That's what you have to go by. So that's why people, tend to go through the entertainment and route. And if you're recognized as a as potential, then yes, you will get recognized. But otherwise, then you don't. And then what are you going to do? What options do you have in life?
Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the recent controversy. There's a gentleman that goes by the name today of Zen Gardner, who I guess he's kind of like a New Age kind of a guy, you know. And he was part of the Children of God. He just came out and admitted that he was part of the Children of God as their PR person, but he never witnessed any kind of molestation or anything. Are you familiar with that whole controversy?
No, there's a lot of no, absolutely not, because there's so many imbeciles out there that are like, oh, this never happened. For instance, with the Children of God Lost and Found, that was a documentary that Noah did about the family where he and it was on we were featured at Sundance,
right,
years ago, and we got ambushed by the Children of God in their Children of God bus. And one of the abusers, who happens to be one of the leaders of the cult, he came up and he's like, oh, well, I don't remember seeing any abuse in that situation, in your situation, Davida. I'm like, yeah, except that you didn't see any abuse in my situation. But he was the leader with Claire Barkowitz in Argentina when they raided the home because Abigail Berry was dying in the hospital from being raped, from the rape abuse, right, and her punctured uterus. So he's like, oh, I never saw you get abused, so how do we know you're not lying? I'm like, wow, you never saw me get abused, but yet you're the thing. This is what I'm saying. This is like there's a whole bunch of imposters out there. And, of course, they're going to come forward and be like, so now he's a different part of a cult? That's interesting. I'd like to look into that. Can we talk about this after the show? Because I'd like to look into what kind of cult this new offspring of cult has just inspired, because it sounds like a really interesting, dangerous situation. It sounds like a whole new form of recruits that he might have. Because if he is like, oh, I never witnessed or saw the abuse, he doesn't have to witness or see it. It's there. Well, you just are blind to it if you choose not to see it. So that would be interesting. Can we discuss it later?
Yeah, absolutely. The guy, he had a different name when he was in the cult, but he was a big shot. He was in charge of their PR or something. And now he's on the radio he's a guru. He's a guru now. He's a guru, you know, leading people to the light and the goodness and and all that kind of crap. I tell you, man. Now, okay, now let me ask you a question here, okay, before we get to this other stuff. When you look at this whole case in its entirety, you guys are traveling to different countries. You're learning different languages. There's a lot of pedophilia, child abuse going on. How come it was that there was no Interpol or CIA? Were you guys under investigation or influenced?
Interpol was always following us. That's why the unit, that's what David Berg's elite society referred to, the ones that, referred and instigated all the reports to all the members. Our unit, the leaders' cult unit, we relocated every 6 months so that Interpol could not keep up with us.
Gotcha. What about?
I have lived in at least 40 different countries, and I have been to at least 70.
Now, what about CIA? Because you hear about these stories about how the CIA, how they're involved in blackmail using children, and this group, the Finders, had a CIA connection. Anything like that? Do you think maybe Berg was a CIA operation or anything like that possible?
Please don't get me discouraged, because if the CIA seriously had that opportunity and they literally never came around to accomplishing it, then that's really depressing, okay? So let's leave the CIA to national situations, because apparently they can't deal with really serious other cult ones. That's probably not that's not their priority. But let's say that if they did have the opportunity, maybe they didn't know. Well, first of all, again, proof, okay? There's only the survivor's proof, the victim's proof. That's us. Now they have to find the leaders, and how are we going to interrogate them? How are we going to get proof from them?
Yeah. Now your brother Rick, he wound up. There's a documentary film about him where he was filming himself as a diary. Can you describe that whole situation? What went on with that?
This was a point in his life where he had realized that he was representing not just himself but the entire children of God, and not just the children of God, because nobody was going to understand the truth behind the revolting abuse and or whether the poor little missionaries who were starving in a foreign land trying to give humanitarian aid to people but couldn't afford to because of the regulations of like how they had to pray and masturbate themselves to Jesus before going out to do missionary work. Who has time for that when you're trying to feed your 7 kids and do missionary work? That's when he realized the hypocrisy and that nobody was going to understand the truth about the children of God unless he became a martyr.
Now, can you describe what he did though? Because it was a pretty intense end to his life.
Well, he clearly thought it out very meticulously because he knew that was the only way that the world would understand and know, and maybe possibly at some point all the victims and survivors would get some justice, some sort of revenge. That's what he wanted. And he's like, then in the meantime, nobody's going to learn. No one's going to understand. No one is going to get it. But that's why he took his own life. And what brought him to that was I had done an interview on a media show. I don't remember if it was CNN or if it was Larry King right before that. But I had done a couple of media shows, and he had come out and he said, this is my sister, and this is what we went through. And he is so disgusted with the fact that the pedophiles are still out there and that we really cannot find a way to try and thrive in society because of our upbringing and trying to be survivors. So he's like, well, this is what happened. And Sue was his nanny, and she molested him. It was all in my mom's Sarah Davida books about how to get, little baby Davida up in the morning and play with his pee-pee and jerk him off and then molest him to bed at night up until he was a teenager. And so his nanny, Sue, she went down there to try and talk him out of being against his mother. And like, Davida is a liar. She never got abused. None of this ever happened. None of it ever. And she went down there to try to convince him, we were never abused. This never happened. This was all love. And if it happened, we were sorry. We don't remember. And he's like, really? Okay, listen to what happened to you then. And that's when that murder-suicide occurred, because she looked to his face and said that we were lying. I was a liar, and that he cannot do this to his mother because he's lying. And he's like, well, this happened. And since you're not going to accept it and I cannot find my mother and I want revenge for my mother as leader of the children of God, and this is not going to happen, then if you're going to call my sister, Davida Kelley, a liar, then first of all, I have to kill you, and now he's going to kill himself. And that was his message to the world. And that was not the right message, but it was a message.
Now, so he did a video diary, and he wanted to get a hold of his mother, right? He was trying to arrange a meeting with his mother, Sarah Davida.
No, his mother is Karen Zerby. My mother is Sarah Davida.
Okay, so he wanted Karen Derby he wanted to get, but he couldn't arrange that.
Yeah.
So he got a hold of Sue, the nanny, and then there was a murder-suicide. Now, what was he doing for a living at the time? Was he like a security guard or something like that, or a bodyguard?
He went up to Alaska, and he went crab to the Alaskan water to go with the crazy crab. There's what's that called on
fisherman?
The crab fishing.
Yeah, the commercial fishermen. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but in those dangerous waters, they have a whole series of TV. So he went and did that, and then he came back, and he was just like a jack of all trades. He was a mechanic. He could speak languages. He could fix anything. He was also a musician, and he was just a charmer. And then his wife, like he had his wife too, that really was trying to keep him stabilized, but his mind was so confused and angry because he could not find his niche in the real world. He could do anything and everything, just like a lot of us ex-family members can do, except we have no proof that we can, and we have no proof of education. So he was just sick and tired of that because he could do anything, but could not establish himself. And, I mean, he would have been a great Navy SEAL. He would have been a great, Special Forces operative. He would have been a great Ranger, because he would have been great at that. And I wish that he would have lived long enough to have been that. But he chose to take his own life as a statement, and it was a statement because now we're all listening, aren't we?
Yeah, it's true. It was a statement, that's for sure. Did he leave? He left behind a wife. Did he leave behind any kids?
No.
And how old was he when he passed?
Well, this was 2005 when he passed, so
it's very recent. Okay. Okay, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry about your loss, Dave. It's very fresh too in your life. It's very recent, so I'm really sorry.
No, it was a while ago. There have been so many tragedies since then, and suicides and losses of lives. He was just the one to represent all the rest of us and all the rest that came through that have died since then. He was just the first martyr. He was the first significant one to step out, because otherwise the world wouldn't recognize anyone else. But now the world knows there has been hundreds of lives that are suicidal, and the cult says, well, that's because you left the cult. That's because we left the cult with with nothing, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. That's why there's a suicide rate.
Yeah, but your brother was very dramatic because he filmed himself. They made a movie about it. It's very, very dramatic, very impactful. But now, growing up, okay, with David Berg, were there weapons around? Was it a weapon type culture? Were there military people or bodyguards?
Yes, bodyguards, no weapons. We did live in a community in the Philippines at the hilltop in Green Hills, Manila. And we did have weapons in, because that was when Corazon Aquino was taking over the Philippines and turning the country into a communist nation when she overthrew Marcos and Imelda.
Right.
The presidents of the Philippines back then. And so because we had this huge compound with acres and acres of land and 5 different units on the compound, we were overcome by Corazon Aquino's communist guerrillas. And so, yes, apparently we did have weapons because we fought the guerrillas off. Meaning I was a child, I was in bed. But apparently the guerrillas were fought off. We also had electric wires all over our compound. So then we immediately evacuated the country within the next few weeks after that incident, apparently, that occurred.
And you don't want to write a book. You haven't written a book about all this.
2 hours to do an interview with you. Imagine how long that would take me to write a book. If somebody really wants to sponsor that, it's going to be a lot of money, because there's a lot of really amazing, incredible stories that nobody's ever heard of or has been told before. But that's going to take a lot of time.
Okay.
And I'm already spending my awesome time with you because I appreciate this opportunity, and I'm going to be a big fan of your show.
Thank you very much. I'm a big fan of yours already. Trust me.
I mean, your live webcast. It's always thank you for that, because especially because you're an investigator. So you are coming from a direction that is not that you can understand, and that you're going to be able to help the public understand too.
Yeah, I think these things are important. People need to know these stories. I try and really focus on the really important historical, iconic stories that people can hear the inside reality of what really went on. Let me ask you a question now. Now, your life, again, you took another turn in your life, because you were telling me that somehow you wound up on the Howard Stern show and you were hanging out with celebrities like Mike Tyson and stuff like that. How did all that come about?
Well, first of all, that's funny, because why did you mention Mike Tyson? Of all the celebrities I've met, that's funny that you mentioned Mike Tyson. Whatever, I gave him a lap dance. along with only blondes that he wanted from the Scores nightclub to dance with him. Only blondes. And that's just right after he bit the ear off of Holyfield.
Yeah.
He had just come in, like, his teeth are all like, still having fresh blood on his teeth and stuff. And we all had this booby, excuse me, this is the public speaking. Okay, so us strippers were dancing for him, and while we had, would you like to reinterpret this for your audience? While we were dancing in his face,
yeah, I
cautioned the other strippers in line words to, everybody watch out for your ears. Ha, 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 ha. And his grimace came out, and he was like, it looked like he had a moment there. And I brought that. Oh, my goodness, that was so awesome to see that for a brief second. He turned into a beast. And then he was like, So Mike Tyson talks like this. So he's like, all of a sudden, I was like, everybody, all right, ladies, watch your ears. And the strippers looked at me like, are you serious? We really don't want to get our ears chewed off right now. Thank you very much.
Well, so did he take a bite? Did he bite you?
No, I was waiting for it. Okay. I'm like, everybody heads up. Boobies up. But that's what was funny, because he went from a beast to like, to him, because he's like, that's funny, but says left. So I was like, whoa. And so that's just that's a ridiculous incident. That's nothing compared to a lot of celebrity incidences that occurred at the Scores nightclub that I was a stripper at, and the poster girl saw that, and the media, promoter at as well, because the Howard Stern show was always promoting Scores, because Scores endorsed him. They gave him $10,000 to bring the strippers on to his show.
Right.
So that's how when I first came to New York as a stripper with my English accent at the time, is when Pamela Anderson came on the show, and she had told the public that she'd come out of the closet, she was done with Tommy Lee, divorced him, was going to be gay. So he's like, all right, well, if you're going to be gay, Pamela Anderson, here's an idea. We're going to bring in some strippers from Scores, and they're going to molest you, or more like Davida's going to molest you. And so he brings me on the show, and I'm like, hello, Pamela. Can you love my bum? Oh, I love your big fake titties. And I'm like sticking my tongue down her throat. And she's like, ew, I don't like cuties, ew. And so Howard Stern's like, come on, Pamela, you're not a lesbian. That's all for a show. You're just trying to make a statement because you got divorced. You're not actually a lesbian. How can you not want to make out with Davida? And so that was funny, because that was just like initially how I got my first step in the door in the media and in front of broadcasting networks in the States of America. Now, so he kicked me. He's like, Pamela, get off my show. You're not lesbian. We met her afterwards at the club, trust me. And then she wore her stripper dress that she rented from the club. No, she didn't rent from the club. She rented from, a designer. And she wore it. It was, anyways, that's a whole funny story. But that was just, initially, that was like my first introduction to the United States. I got here. I still had my English accent because I was telling everyone I was from London. And Pamela Anderson was on the show. So, that was just, one of the hundreds of encounters back in the good old days. And this is back when the Gambinos and the Gottis ran Scores, before Mayor Giuliani took over.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Let me ask you a question. Now, did Howard and Gary and all, did they know about your background with this cult and anything, and being in Russia and all this stuff? Did they know any of this?
To some extent, they do, because Gary he kept in contact with me. That's his former producer. I'm not sure if he still is, but he was decades ago.
Yeah, he's still there.
And Howard said, I knew personally because I was also his masseuse. I'm a licensed massage therapist. And so I would tell him long, awesome bedtime stories at his gym where he was getting trained. I was his massage therapist. And so he heard some stories. I just didn't think he would ever remember them. But he knows who I am. I've been on his show 5 times.
Right. But he knows who I am. His producer knows who I am. They know who I am, but I mean, it's one of many shows I've been on, and one of many
very amusing people that he's had on his show. I'm sure I was outstanding because, well, I was also an entertainer, a stripper, and and his masseuse. So he knows me.
No, I know that he knows it, but did they know the whole story about the family and the children of God and being in Russia and all that stuff?
Oh, I don't know if they do, but I'm sure if they knew that they would most likely want me back on their show. I'm not sure who I could molest now. Pamela Anderson's old.
So,
but they have to take me.
At the time, okay, when you're trying to, you're pitching yourself for the show, you want to get, you never thought to pitch that story to Gary and say, hey, let me tell you about when I was in Russia and the Russian mafia had me and I had escaped with my brother. You didn't think to try and pitch that?
Too soon, Gary. Howard Stern's show was meant as me as representing Scores.
Right.
I was their representative as the ultimate fantasy entertainer. I'm not going to get on this show and talk about my disturbing childhood upbringing and my survivor story. I'm there as an entertainer.
That's true. Would have been bad PR for Scores. Okay.
No, I'm not going to mention that. Now, maybe decades later, they're going to recognize me and be like, oh, wow. And, oh, wow, she still looks really good.
Yeah, no, you do look good.
That's so different. So, yeah, really. Thank you.
Now, if we were to go back, if we were to go back on the, I guess it was on the E! Show, right? If we were to go back and look at those E! tapes, we would find you on there and see that?
You can find me on any show that I've been on. Good Lord. It was Enos This Investigates. There was Children of God Lost and Found by Noah Toppenberg. There was the Morgan... Oh, there was Howard... oops, okay. I was obviously on Larry King Live, too, and along with Juliana Buring. And there's plenty of shows that you can look up these interviews with that I've tried to express. But it's different because being able to talk to you over in a live interview like this is a little bit easier than actually having cameras and lights in your face. So thank you for that, and I really appreciate the opportunity for that because it's a little more intimidating representing like a survivor cult network that so many children have died.
Yeah.
Victims from, you know. So there's a few victims that are left that have survived. It's hard in front of cameras. So this is a really great opportunity. Thank you for that. Thank you for having me here.
No, thank you. And I told you in the email, I told you it's going to be relaxed. It's easy. You know, it's a very easy interview. Now, what about you had some contact with Oscar De La Hoya, right?
Some contact with Oscar? No. He came to the Score Strip Club.
Right. And
he loves blondes. His ex-wife was a Playboy model, and she looks kind of like me. Shannon, I think her name is Shannon. But he used to come into Scores when we'd get the VIP room, and he had a foot fetish. Oh, God. Are your listeners ready for this? Because it involves stinky feet. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
He like to massage my feet, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm telling you, Oscar, this is really bad. I've been in these shoes like 6 hours already. And he's like, oh, and here's what Oscar De La Hoya sounds like in real life, okay? And he's also really, really small and very muscular. He's like, oh, this smells like a stinky feet and baby powder. I'm like, yep, that's it. I put baby powder in my stripper shoes before I put them on. So, yes, you're correct. That is stinky feet and baby powder that you're smelling. Ew. And toe jam. Ew. And then he liked to, he would taste that. Toe jam. So that was fun. Then he's like, oh, you want to go party after? I'm like, of course we're going to go party after with you. And he liked a particular Brazilian woman in the club. So he asked me to bring her. Because he actually wanted to get down with her, not so much me, because oh my goodness, that was fun. Because we used to always go back and party with celebrities after they came to the club. Like, name a celebrity, I'll tell you whether yes or no. I either partied with them or was asked to. So that's where that story can go. But afterwards, it was, oh my goodness, he loves his cross dressing. He looks sexy in all sorts of stripper attire. It's not known. his ex-wives know this, and his baby mamas, so this is funny. It's just like, whatever. That's just a random story, along with hundreds of others from all the amazing nightlife that being a stripper in Scores was, under, that is, and I do miss the rule of the Gambinos and Gottis when they had, when everybody was successful and made money back in the day.
Now, I'm from New York. I'm from New York. I grew up in Staten Island, and I owned a nightclub in Manhattan for a while, too. So, now, let me ask you a question, though. Now, around that time, a lot of the girls who worked at Scores, they had these membership keys to, like, the Plaza Hotel and stuff like that. There were, like, certain memberships. What can you describe that, what that was like?
I couldn't know, because these girls who had membership keys were probably the ones that were working the VIP rooms and making the money.
Right.
So while they were in there, like, giving really explicit lap dances, ! I was outside interacting with the celebrities. So I have no idea what was going on in the private rooms, but I can imagine. So they were the ones that had those. I was out there engaging with celebrities and being the promotional model, because you have to pay to work at Scores.
Right.
And back in the day, you didn't have to pay much. But back in the day, also, I was the poster child. I was, I looked great. Back in the day, I looked great on camera. I think I kind of still do.
No, you still do.
But back in the day, yeah, that was that. So I didn't have to pay. I was just like part of the media network. So socializing with the celebrities was my job, and I was able to, I didn't get paid for that, but I didn't have to pay. So I got to be a social media star and celebrity and hang out with the celebrities. But as far as going back to the hotels, the girls that were working the private rooms, that's what they told me about. I did not have private keys, but of course the promotional guys from Scores probably did, because they had access to. We were dealing with all celebrities, so of course I'm sure there was some sort of private everything.
Yeah, I'm sure something was going on. So now, but some of these hotels that had this arrangement with Scores were Trump hotels. Are you familiar with that?
Well, no, absolutely not familiar. But it sounds it could have been. Sure.
It sounds possible. It sounds possible.
I have no idea. Okay. I didn't go to the hotel. I didn't go to the after hours. I wasn't an after. Right. I wasn't a full service after hour chick. I was there for the media. Okay, and I don't go back to your hotel.
I know. You didn't. Of course not. But I'm.
This is happening. I'm aware of that. This is what all the chicks. This is how they made their money,
right.
And that's why they were smart enough to have the evidence for that and go to court or get degrees. But I was out front doing media, so yes, of course that occurred. I'm not sure if it was at a Trump hotel or not, but let's see. It was. If we're talking about his scandal from a decade ago, who knows?
No, I'm talking about that at the time, back in the 90s and stuff like that, and when around that time when those certain names were running Scores, there was a relationship between Scores and the Trump hotels. No?
I don't know about that
okay.
Because
okay.
I wouldn't care. How would I?
I'm just asking. I'm asking you.
Hundreds of
it's a little question.
Celebrities on my little black notebook. Okay, I can't tell you which hotel I went to after our parties with. I know I partied with them, and there were other hotels that the other chicks who were actually not just going to party, but were going to just be the mistress for the night. I don't know. That sounds interesting, though. Wow, I wonder if there were.
I wonder. Yeah, we'll have to look into that.
I don't know. Poor Trump. I mean, what is he going to say? It's hotel. He's not going to know what went on there, right?
Well, but the whole.
How's he going to know? Unless, of course, he was conspiring with a Gambino and Gottis back in the day, and I'm sure he made a sweet buck or two off them. I'm just saying, because he is an entrepreneur. And he is, an incredible businessman, which is why he wants to make our country great, right?
Right. And if you're from New York, you realize that if you were in a construction business back in those days, or you had to do business with people.
Oh, well, I wouldn't know because I was a stripper back in the days, honey, not not an entrepreneur.
You weren't as well in the construction business. No, that's okay. With all with your oil smuggling and all the other activities you're up to, you didn't also dabble in building some buildings. Oh my God! Listen, we're down to about 10 minutes. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask you that you think it's important you want people to know about?
I guess what us survivors would like to know right now is like because of the time that has passed. How do you bring these abusers to justice who are still thriving, like Karen Zerby, Rick's mom, the leader of the Children of God, and Karen Berkowitz, who was the leader of the Children of God in South America, that was responsible for Abigail's ultimate passing, ultimately. You know, Abigail was so violently raped, and because she was the first survivor to stand up, despite the consequences that she was expecting, that she was going to get from the cult, and not knowing anything at that young age. Like, us survivors recognize Abigail Berry, and what we want to know is how is there anything, like, how do these people still exist? And Karen Zerby and Claire Borkowitz and even my mother, but like she's already senile, so that's her excuse to all the abuse. It's an empty chapter in our lives, and it'd be great to have closure. And is there anything that can be done? Is there? Or is it just that people now know? And that's just sad because we've lost so many lives, and we really, you know, from child abuse, the victims that have survived that just went on to commit suicide. And there are still more victims out there, and there just needs to not be any more suicide. And it'd be interesting to know from the public what they feel about the statute of limitations, because, you know, because now the victims are dead, and the survivors are still here, and the abusers are still thriving.
Well, there's no statute of limitations on murder, you know, which is this young girl, Abigail, you know, the cause of her death was is considered murder. Yeah.
There was no murder. She wasn't murdered. She died. She died alone.
Yeah, but
after she had just got out of rehab, she died alone. It wasn't murder. She died alone.
Yeah,
but it was murder ultimately because her family rejected her. She wasn't allowed to contact any of her friends, and she had no means to be able to reach out to anybody with support or help. And that's why I tell people who have come out from the Children of God, like, go to your families. And the families don't understand, though. That's a problem. It's really hard to explain our incredible abusive past to family members who had no idea we even existed.
Right.
So how do you get help from anybody? Or how do you get justice? How do you get revenge? How do you get closure?
Are you in touch with any of the members of your immediate family?
Yes, my sisters. I do have one or two that that love me, and a couple that don't. So I'm sort of distant from my sisters. They don't want to have anything to do with me because I understandably realize that, because they're very successful and intelligent, and they have their own companies and their own businesses. That's how incredible they have become. And they did not experience the sexual abuse that my generation did. Gotcha. They are the third generation of kids that left the cult. They didn't escape, they left. But they left because they were educated, and because they were educated because we educated them. As 12-year-olds, I taught my sister how to read math dots and write and read in several different languages. My youngest sister could read and write in 3 different languages by age 2. Oh, and swim and dive. So these kids are super intelligent, so they do not want to have anything to do with the cult, and I understand that, because they are a new breed and a generation that never, thankfully, was exposed to the violent abuse that my generation was exposed to. So they are big enough and coming, and that's great. That's a great new feature to look forward to. But there's my generation that we're all concerned about, because we still suffer from really bad PTSD and hope in life, and then just the lingering memories of there's nothing ever happened to give us justice, and nobody cares.
Now, I don't remember if I asked you this before or not. It wasn't in my notes. I was going to ask you, but did you get any kind of therapy for what you've been through?
Well, what I consider therapy is being active. So when I have anxiety or really bad PTSD or go through bipolar depression, and I do have that, I go diving. I'm a certified diver. I go diving. Or I'll go and to a charity network, like with the kids in my neighborhood who come home after school hungry, don't have a ride home, and they walk home, and they're like 8 years old. I concern myself with issues that are bigger than mine right now,
right? Because
that helps me calm myself. So I don't need to go to a therapist. I don't need to be under medication, because I don't want to be medicated and have an alter understanding of reality. I just want to be able to live every day and still be as successful and productive as I am. And that's what I'm doing, and I'm doing it pretty well. So that's yay.
Listen, Davida Kelley, God bless you. Thank you so much for everything you shared with us today. Davida Kelley, you could find her, some of the information that she's talking about today, on the website xfamily.org. Her website, if you want to check out her fetish photos and modeling pictures, Model Mayhem, of course, but also to davidakellyfans.wix.com. Davida, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And we got to, there's so many different topics here. We really got to get back together again and flesh all this out.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, because it's a great topic, and I'm sure that everybody is now, is interested. It's disturbing, but it's a reality, and it's also very entertaining. So I'm looking forward to speaking to you again. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, good night.
Good night.
Okay, Davida Kelley. davidakellyfans.wix.com. I hope everybody stuck to the end, because I know in the first half hour was a little frantic. And I think if we keep doing a couple more shows, we can go over this information again. We'll get a lot of good information out of here. Fascinating topic. If you enjoyed this show and you enjoyed this topic, and you want to support the show, OppermanReport.com. There's much more stuff like this in the member section. These kind of topics, I'm sure a couple of these shows we're going to be doing on this in the future will be in the member section. So you can become a member. You go to OppermanReport.com for as little as $6 a month. If you want to do a yearly membership, I can give you like a month free if you contact me directly at OppermanReport@gmail.com. And I'll give you a little deal on the member section there, okay, if you pay me directly. Also, too, in the member section, we have all kinds of documents and videos and all kinds of interesting stuff. We have that 24-page letter. I was arguing with some guy on Facebook the other day about the 24-page letter where Jeffrey Epstein's lawyers talk about how he helped create the Clinton Foundation. So we have a lot of great stuff in there that I want you to check out and help support the show if you like tonight's show. Okay? And also, too, we have shows coming up on Fridays and Saturdays. And I do these member section shows during the week. We always have new content. We just did a broadcast from the Hillary debate last night. We went down there and covered that for you. No, not the debate, the Hillary rally, which I want to talk to you about. I'll talk to you about that in the after show, which will probably be after this show here, because I think I'm going to play this Friday night. What happened down there, because it's really interesting how the Hillary Clinton campaign treats the press. They buy them food, and they're really very attentive to the press. So I can see why the press falls in love with them and really kisses their butts. Okay, Davida Kelley. DavidaKellyFans.wix.com. Another website is xfamily.org. A lot of great information, guys. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week.